Welcome to the Growing Tall Poppies podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nat Green, and I'm so excited to have you join me as we discuss what it means to navigate your way through post-traumatic growth and not just survive, but to thrive after trauma. Through our podcast, we will explore ways for you to create a life filled with greater purpose, self-awareness, and a deep inner peace. Through integrating the many years of knowledge and professional experience, as well as the wisdom of those who have experienced trauma firsthand, we will combine psychology, accelerated approaches, coaching, and personal experience to assist you to learn, to grow, and to thrive. I hope to empower you to create deeper awareness and understanding and stronger connections with yourself and with others, whilst also paving the way for those who have experienced trauma and adversity to reduce their suffering and become the very best versions of themselves in order to thrive. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I'm super excited today to bring you our next guest on the Growing Tall Poppies podcast. It's my absolute pleasure and privilege to welcome an amazing lady who I only met earlier this year in her role as my supervisor in a certification program that I'm currently enrolled in. I'm so excited to introduce you to her today so you can all get to know this gorgeous lady as well. She's had, and she'll tell us more about it, she's had many traumatic experiences and is a wonderful example of a tall poppy, constantly shining her light brightly in the world, despite all the trauma and adversity she's been through, and she's making a huge difference in the lives of so many. So let me introduce you to Emiline Duncan. Emiline, and I'm going to call her Em.
Sounds good to me, Nat.
Excellent. Em is a counsellor, counselling supervisor, T.R.E. provider, and I'll let her explain. She'll do it much better than me around what T.R.E. is. She's a T.R.E. Global Certification Trainer and Supervisor, and she runs her own business called the Nurture Foundation. So welcome, Em. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks, Nat. So excited to be chatting with you today. So as you know me, I can chat about T.R.E. all day long. So if you need to, just give me the kind of shortened hand signal if I start to get too excited.
Not at all. That's what I love about you, your passion and enthusiasm. And I know that is really going to shine through for all our guests and listeners today. So as we know, my guest interviews are around speaking with people who have experienced trauma or adversity and how they've navigated their experience and any lessons or learnings that they have as a result of what they've been through. So let's start with you giving us a brief introduction of who you are and what you do in the world, and then we'll move forward into what you've been through.
Okay. So I am, like most of us, a product of intergenerational trauma. So there's trauma on both sides of my lineage. And so then let's just combine that together and bring two very traumatized people and create a family. And that in itself has really set me on this path that I'm on. There was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of activation. There was a lot of turmoil in my household growing up, which caused a lot of issues for me internally and externally. And then in my adult life, I have found that because of relational dynamics that were modelled to me as a child, I've ended up in narcissistic relationship after narcissistic relationship, and to a really extensively damaging degree. And throughout this whole time, because I was born into a world of other people's pain and I was existing and enduring through that pain in my, primary and teenage years, when I got to my adult years, I made a conscious decision to myself that I did not want to repeat the patterns and the lifestyles of my parents. And so I've been on this journey of self-growth and self-development for over 30 years now. Makes me feel really old, but that's, that's the reality.
Wise. Age
Let's go
brings
with that.
wisdom.
Let's go with that. And so I've been on this path, and I've tried it all. I've done the dance therapy and the talk therapy and the tapping and the shamanic rituals, and I've had my death and I've had my birth, and I've written letters to myself and I've journaled. I've belted pillows, you name it, I've done it. And they've all had a great place in my healing and my growth.
Yep.
But it really wasn't until I came across this process called T.R.E, which stands for tension release exercises or trauma release exercises, that things really started to shift for me. So I had done talk therapy for years, and I had been a talk therapist for a little while when I first started to learn T.R.E. And what I found was that in that first session that I decided to learn T.R.E because I wanted to give something to my clients in between sessions other than deep breathing and mindfulness. Because
Okay.
when I did deep breathing and mindfulness with some people, it worked beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I did deep breathing and mindfulness with other people, it completely blew them up. And I didn't understand why at the time, although I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to give my clients a tool and a process that they could use to help regulate them in between sessions. So I lay on this floor in Greensborough in this hall must have been November. And I remember dropping my knees out and experiencing the process for the first time. And it was like my body was breathing oxygen. And I was like, wow, this is absolutely phenomenal. It's so powerful. But I really just from that moment, I wanted to bring T.R.E to as many people as I possibly can. And what I know is that T.R.E, in talk therapy, we are allowing people to access their memories, access their experience, put a narrative around it.
Mm-hmm.
We often can find ways of reframing it, creating deeper understandings, deeper levels of meaning. We can turn our pain into our purpose, all of those beautiful and wonderful things. But what I noticed was that when people were still when that trauma was still actively living in their body,
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't move on from the past. And that was totally my experience as well. I tried everything. I call myself a bit of a spiritual thrill seeker because I'll give almost anything a go. And as I said, all of those practices, beautiful and wonderful, but it still wasn't giving me the big shifts that I truly needed.
So you felt that something was definitely missing. And again, this has been exactly where I've come from as well. As you know, I'm a clinical psychologist, so trained very much in evidence-based practice, and that's how I've lived my life, and I've made a difference in people's lives, and I've majored in trauma. That's where I've worked for 34 years. But I did feel that talk therapy wasn't enough. Continuing to talk about people's trauma kept them stuck. And it wasn't until I experienced my own significant trauma that I really got, as you did, deeper into it and tested things out on myself. So I love that you have had the courage to talk about that. And, it's been something I've avoided talking about for a long time. So I'm feeling really grateful and blessed that you've been able to come on so we can have that conversation, because I think that this really is the key to helping people release the stuff we've held on to for years. So thank you.
And so true, Nat, and I really echo that. I have lots of people that come to see me that say, I've seen numerous practitioners and, no one can give me an answer. And what they are actually experiencing is a lot of activation in their body. But our current mental health practices, and look, I think there's so much importance for evidence-based practices. But at this point in time, because T.R.E is around 20, maybe 30 years-ish, it's still a baby in terms of mental health practices. And even though it is such an efficient, simple, self-generative process, because it's not evidence-based, it doesn't get the exposure that it really needs to have. And, what stands out to me when it comes to our traditional talk therapies is it's very much top down.
Absolutely.
But we know that trauma is stored visually and viscerally.
Yes.
So people will get flashbacks and people will get physiological symptoms
Absolutely.
based upon what's stuck in their body. And you can talk about that till the cows come home. But when all that bracing and holding is stuck in the body, it's not going to shift it. And there's a reason for that, because our amygdala, our back brain, is the first part of us that develops. So that's where our survival mechanism exists. It's in the body, it's in our back brain.
Yeah.
And the thing that we try to use for trauma therapy is our front brain, our prefrontal cortex, that isn't fully developed until we're 25 years of age.
Exactly.
The joke is some people never.
Yes, exactly. Not everybody gets there, do they,
Everyone
as
gets
we know?
I will probably not get there as well, but anyway, I'm on my way, hopefully. But we're using this very underdeveloped part of our brain, this prefrontal cortex is trying to work on things from when we were 1, 2, 3 years old, and it just can't access things in the same way
Exactly.
that the body can. So
Yeah.
when we involve the body in therapy, and this is the beautiful thing, with T.R.E, I see when people are consistent with the practice, they get some significant shifts. I've had people, reduce medication, come off medication. I've had chronic pain significantly reduce or completely resolve. I've had, people with lifelong anxiety and depression start to actually feel good for the first time in their life. So
Wow.
it's such a powerful, powerful technique and simple.
And that's what I love about it. And I know before we got on the call today, we were talking about the last episode that I did, and you'd listened to it and you made a comment. And I thought, wow, that's not coincidental that I finally gave myself, while I was sick for a couple of weeks, the gift of rest and listen to my body. And I know that I've never done that before, but I didn't put two and two together until we started talking that, of course, the reason that I'm now more attuned to my body is that I've been doing the T.R.E. and I'm integrating that into my life and my daily practice. So that was awesome to hear you point that out and go, yes, that's exactly what's going on.
Yeah. And we know that trauma causes levels of dissociation from the body, and not just trauma, but our modern lifestyle as
Yes.
well. So we send our kids to school and we tell them not to move till the bell goes, not to eat until lunchtime, not to get a drink of water till the teacher says so, not to go to the bathroom until they're allowed. So we've got all of these ways that we reinforce the suppression of our natural instincts. And then we go to work and we've got, high pressure jobs, and we're working more hours than we possibly can cope with a workload that's beyond, our capacity to deal with. And so then we have to have these layers of dissociation in order to exist in the world. But those layers of dissociation actually keep us stuck. How can we heal if we can't listen to our body's need for rest? How can we feel
Yeah.
free if we can't listen to our body's need to experience and be with our grief? So every time, and it took me, I'm a little bit slow, it took me about 4 years of personal practice to realise that every time I got down and practiced T.R.E, I was returning to myself more and more deeply every time, because we are freeing ourselves from that old somatic debris, and
Yeah.
then that just makes more space for who we truly are, which is just so beautiful. It doesn't change us. It actually just allows us to connect with our innate potential.
Absolutely. And get more clarity around who we really are and our whole identity at a really deep soul level, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose I should probably do like a little introduction of T.R.E now that I'm going on about it.
Absolutely. I'd love for you to give an explanation of what T.R.E is, what it looks like, because I know that it's going to become more and more a talking point for this podcast. And I'm, looking at getting you on again if you're interested as we talk more about that and really start to get this practice out in the world. So
Yeah.
go for
And
it,
like,
Em.
And, in my dreams, everyone is doing T.R.E. Like, there's so many people doing yoga and breath work and meditation now. When I started on my journey 30 years ago, nobody was doing any of that stuff. I'd be
No.
telling people that I'd be going to workshops and retreats, and they'd look at me like I was insane, which I probably slightly was back then.
Couple of head, extra fingers, and
That's right. What are you doing that for? So, T.R.E. stands for tension release exercises or trauma release exercises, and it was developed by a man called David Baselli, who was working as a humanitarian in war zones.
mm-hmm.
And he noticed that when bombs were going off, the adults wouldn't shake, but the children would. And it didn't matter which country or culture he was in, it was the same deal. And then he came home after working in these, highly traumatic crisis situations,
Mm-hmm.
and he himself developed PTSD. And he went off and did talk therapy for 3 or 4 years. And he said to his therapist, I understand everything that's happened to me, but I still feel so much rage and despair and overwhelm. So then he went off and did a whole bunch of physical practices and then came back and reorganized it to create this beautiful process called T.R.E. So in T.R.E, we are using a simple set of stretch and release exercises to engage what we call the neurogenic tremor response.
Mm-hmm.
So we all have this tremor response in us, like we've all got an immune system in us. It's just
Yep.
part of our physiology. And it's actually our trauma recovery response. But because we see shaking as being physically weak, being out of control, being overwhelmed, being cold, anything that's not desirable, we just intrinsically shut it down without even realizing that we're doing it. We can see that sometimes if someone's had a car accident and they're shaking, what do? We hug them or we put a blanket around. We almost try and stop that tremoring process.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. I know I had a car accident years ago and they just quickly put a warm blanket on and, oh, stop shaking, love. It's okay. You're safe. That sort of thing. So that's
yes.
pretty well entrenched and ingrained in society that, oh, something must be wrong.
Yeah, something must be wrong. And so we shut it down and we think that the tremoring's going into the stress response, but the tremoring's actually us coming out of the stress
Mm.
response. So when we inhibit that shaking, we're actually stopping ourselves from actually coming out of the stress response.
So stopping the trauma from what's happened, actually processing fully. So again, it's getting stuck. Yeah.
Yep, it's getting stuck. And when it gets stuck in our bodies, we feel tightness in our chest, we feel the twist in our stomach, we feel the clenching in our jaw, we don't
Mm.
sleep well at night, we end up with autoimmune diseases, we end up
Yep.
with, all kinds of chronic health conditions because we've got so many layers of trauma. And
Mm.
so we were talking before about your work, you worked extensively in trauma.
Yep.
I remember when I did my counselling degree, trauma was an elective.
Mm.
And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And then
Yeah.
when I did my T.R.E. training, I said to my mentor, Richmond Heath, I said to him, I think everyone's traumatized. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, no, I think everyone's traumatized. He's like, yeah.
Mm.
Okay. So we've all got trauma, especially if it's
Absolutely.
decades on the planet, we've all got it.
Absolutely. And even more so, anyone who's lived through the COVID pandemic, regardless of where you sit on a continuum of believing in it or not, everyone experienced change and restrictions, and everything changed, and trauma impacted the whole world.
The whole world. And we know that when we're traumatized, the reason why it gets stuck in us is because there's too many responses, there's too much overwhelm,
Mm.
there's too much activation for us to be able to process in the moment. We
Yes.
don't have STD, stress traumatic disorder. We have PTSD, post. It's like it's not
Mm.
until we get out of the danger zone that we actually start to feel what our bodies have been through.
Yes, definitely.
And so with T.R.E, we have experiences that have you had this experience before? We've had a really bad day, you've had so much happen, You've come home, you've had a cup of tea, you've had some dinner, and you're still feeling uptight, but it's like, I don't know how to get to that to move it through. We have a bath and it sort of helps. We might go for a walk and it sort of helps. But these are very much outside in processes,
Yeah,
whereas
definitely.
T.R.E is an inside out process, which is why it
Mm.
works so effectively.
Yeah. And I was going to say, no, of course, I've never had a day like that where I've come home like that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Not in your line of work.
No,
It's
definitely,
it.
never. But
Oh,
yeah, that's exactly right. That we need to normalize this instead of
yes.
trauma being this horrible thing that takes years and years to treat in therapy, if you ever get over it, in inverted commas, that we need to normalize trauma and adversity, and also show people that there is a way to cope with it, to manage it, and to really reach post-traumatic growth and have the response and be okay and still be able to thrive.
Yeah. And that's it, Nat. Like we think about having all of these awful experiences. And if we are stuck in the trauma, if the trauma is stuck in our body and it's completely looping, then it
Mm-hmm.
feels like a life sentence.
Yes.
And it's not that we experience fight, flight, or freeze. That's part of our neurological protection mechanism, so
Yes.
that when we're in difficult circumstances, our body, we're not waiting for the 25-year-old with still growing prefrontal cortex to
Yep.
rationalize and weigh things up and make a good decision and maybe phone a friend. It's like our nervous system goes, this is good enough. This is what's going to survive. We'll
Yep.
worry about the rest later.
Mm.
So, when we have had those experiences of trauma and overwhelm, and I was speaking with Richmond the other day, and I said, I actually think T.R.E should be called trauma reintegration exercises. Because we're
Absolutely.
not squeezing the trauma out of us, we're not getting rid of it from us, we're actually allowing those process defense responses to complete themselves so that we can actually come to a place of acceptance, a place of meaning, a place of growth, a place of expansion. This is the true potential of post-traumatic growth.
Oh, absolutely love that reframe. And really, it is. It's reintegrating it. And again, as we said, normalizing it, that this
Yeah,
is our body's normal response. It's not bad. Don't stop it. Allow the process, allow it to integrate and reintegrate so we can make sense of it, get the lessons, get the learnings, and then know what we need to do next.
absolutely. And, T.R.E is really quite a simple process.
Mm.
The art form of T.R.E is learning how to read and follow the body. So pretty much anyone can drop their knees out and get their legs to shake.
Mm-hmm.
But as we're exploring together, learning how to regulate, keeping people's process soft and gentle actually helps them get more from it. Whereas in regular exercise, we've all been to the PT, all that have made us want to cry and run and, tear super gentle, and it's meant to be super gentle, particularly with our tender nervous systems that have been through a lot. And
Exactly.
then being able to notice how that movement is spontaneously rippling through the body and helping the body expand into those places, it's a really beautiful process to be a part of.
It certainly is. And one of the things for me since I came into the TRE world, which I think was middle of last year, and I went to one of Richmond's, well, I was actually doing my own trauma healing work and taking it to the next level. And again, feeling that something else missing. And it was recommended that I go to the TRE workshop. So I did. I thought, oh, yeah, we'll see what this is, ever the skeptic. I'll see what happens.
Yep.
And again, 2 days with Richmond, and I was blown away at how it wasn't some pie in the sky process that I couldn't see, that I couldn't feel, and that I couldn't notice a change in quickly. What I loved about it was a basic, gentle, as you said, physical process. And I could feel changes within my body very quickly. And it felt that things changed. I remember the very first night, I don't know that I shared it with you, I shared it with Richmond at the time, that I did TRE the very first time and thought, oh, this is a bit weird, making myself tremor and shaking around thinking, oh God, whatever, who knows if I'm doing it right, but I just went with the process. And we know that that's exactly what you need to do. That for the first time in 13 years since my major traumas, I slept really well. Oh, no, it gets better. And I had a dream, and I dreamt multiple times through the night, and it was in colour. And I had not done that since I was a kid.
Wow.
Mm.
It's like I just don't get sick of sharing this process with people because these are the miracles that we see all the time. You know, I'll have people kind of shake their legs and sit up and say, wow. And even though their face hasn't moved, this is the loosest my jaw's been in 3 years.
Yeah.
The shifts are actually quite profound. And the other thing that I love about it, Nat, is that this isn't about going to see a therapist for 25 sessions for the next 3 years of your life. This is a process that once you learn it well, once you can regulate it well, once you have gotten accustomed to the process, you can use it on your own for the rest of your life. And this is how David Baselli designed it, because he wanted to bring it all into communities. I mean, you can't have pretty TRE classes in a war zone. You know, these people need support right now. And it's been used in like Ukraine and Afghanistan to support these people that are dealing with big crises all the time.
Exactly.
So it's been designed to be a technique for the people. It really is powerful and yet so accessible.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And to engage in it first with a trained TRE provider like yourself and be guided initially. And some people will only need a couple of sessions and others might need 10 before they get the hang of doing it and you feel confident that they can manage it on their own. And that's a successful therapy or process, because we don't want to continue as therapists, counselors, coaches. We don't want people to rely on us for the rest of their lives to feel better or to process things. That's ridiculous. We want to be made redundant.
Yes. Yes.
The best therapist, coach, counselor is someone who helps people get through the process in an accelerated way, gets the change they need, and it's a long-term, ongoing, sustainable change.
Absolutely. And this is the thing that, you know, I will sometimes see people only for a few sessions so that they can learn the practice, and then off they go and they use it on their own. And then they come back to me when their body is stuck in a particular dynamic, or if they're wanting to deepen their practice, then they'll come and see a TRE provider.
Yeah.
But on the most part, and this is the beautiful thing, I say people will come and see us as practitioners anywhere along that trauma transformation continuum.
Yes.
Sometimes people will be really traumatized, they'll be in deep crisis, they'll be stuck in a bad place, and TRE will move them along. Sometimes people are just stressed. They're, I deal with a lot of burnout, a lot of chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. Again, as long as you keep on shaking, you're going to keep on moving yourself along that trauma transformation continuum. But you don't have to be traumatized. And Richmond will love me for this because he's always banging the drum about it's not just about trauma. Right? This is a process for transformation release exercises.
Exactly.
This is trauma resilience. You don't have to go into a trauma. If you practice this process of TRE, you are going to build your levels of resilience. You are going to build your levels of capacity. There's lots of sports teams. They're clearly not traumatized. Maybe if they lose a game, they might be shaking all over the place. But, they're in their exercise programs to develop strength, to develop flexibility, to develop mental agility. So there's such a wide spectrum to apply T.R.E. from. It's not just about trauma, which makes it exciting. And this is the thing that I say to all my people, it never stops working. So just because you've moved out of your trauma and you're feeling okay, don't stop shaking, because you're going to miss the best bit. You keep on shaking and you get new layers of creativity, new layers of vitality, new layers of expansion, new layers of growth. So it really is one of those lifelong practices that just supports our human growth and evolution.
Yeah, I love that. And yes, so exactly as you said, not only, I mean, obviously it's not just for trauma, but for those of us, because most of the people listening to this podcast have been through some sort of trauma, that not only does it help you heal, but it helps you then move into thriving. So you deepen your learnings, you deepen your practice experience, and you reach a whole new level as the layers peel away that you would never have known was possible had you just continued on doing stock standard practices. And as you said, and as I know, that there's definitely a place for talk therapy. Absolutely. It works. But if you are feeling stuck or stagnant, or that something just isn't moving you the way you want it to, then this practice, T.R.E., is absolutely brilliant for helping shift that. And then it might be, yes, you go back to talk therapy and suddenly things accelerate for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, Nat, did you know the symbolism behind the poppy as a symbol of growth?
I'd love for you to share that.
So I was doing a little bit of research this morning before we jumped on the call together. And the symbol of the poppy comes from the war zones in France.
Mm-hmm.
So poppies would grow on these battlefields. And so they were a symbol of the bloodshed that occurred during these battles.
Mm-hmm.
But they're also a symbol of growth and regeneration. And that's really what we're both wanting to support more and more people to do, is actually find that growth and find that regeneration after all of the difficulty and challenge and trouble that we've experienced. So
I love that.
So beautifully fitting for both what you bring and also T.R.E.'s practice as well.
Oh, I absolutely love that. That makes me even feel more aligned to the fact, because as we know, it was set up originally. I went with the poppy because people, we know that tall poppies are frowned upon in Australia in particular, that if you do something that makes you stand out, if you advocate for things, or if you really do some amazing things, then people like to knock you down and cut you down and bring down those tall poppies. And I am a huge believer in owning what we're good at, advocating for others, and really being a voice and taking a stand for people who often can't speak up for themselves until they can, and showing them a way to do that. So I absolutely love that idea of growth as well as transformation, and that the bloodshed things can go, and we can let them go and regenerate and stand strong and tall and be nurtured along the way. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I just thought that was so beautiful.
It is.
It's like there is so much beauty on the other side. And when we're stuck in that activation, we feel like that's all that we're ever going to be in. But when we keep on going with the process, it's like that movement is medicine. It's like, if in doubt, shake it out. Just get on the floor and shake and move it through your physiology. And when you persist with that, you will get there. You will get there.
Yeah. So let's just go back then. So you found T.R.E. You were blown away by, wow, this really works. This is amazing. And then you entered that T.R.E. world, and you've obviously thrown yourself into it and become certified. And now you're mentoring people like me as we do our certification and really spreading the word and the message out around the world. So how have these experiences transformed your perspective on life and relationships and personal values since finding T.R.E?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I feel, it's going to sound a bit strange, but I feel like I'm more myself than I've ever been before. I feel like I'm more comfortable in my skin. It's interesting. I got a new phone last year and, had to record a new voicemail. And I listened to my voice and I'm like, my voice sounds completely different. So
Wow.
even my voice is more embodied than it's ever been before. Things that have plagued me for years. So I had some dental trauma. So my funny story, not so funny at the time.
Oh.
So I was 14 and I decided to starfish into bed and my face collected the bedside table and snapped off one of my front teeth.
Oh.
A
Oh.
painful
Oh.
teenager wanting to look good,
Oh.
terrible, and
Disaster.
disaster. And then also too, the medical procedures that I had to go through in order to fix the tooth.
Oh.
And so I could think back to that time and the
Mm-hmm.
memory is really vague and I don't even feel anything in my body. But what I can tell you is when I was 22 years of age, I would have to call any new dentist and say, I know I sound like a normal person now, but when I rock up at the dental surgery, I'm going to be a basket case. I'm like, no, you'll be fine. And so I would literally be crying before I even walked through the door. I'd be shaking. And this is before I knew anything about the nervous system and T.R.E. And I would be an absolute mess. I had one practitioner ask me, like, have you taken anything to help your nerves? And I said, look, I've taken 2 Valium and I can't take any more than that. Otherwise, I'll be off the planet. But because my body was in so much activation, the medication felt like I was having a cup of tea because there was so much adrenaline and
Yeah.
cortisol coursing through my body. Now, I didn't specifically work on my dental trauma through T.R.E.
Okay.
But I noticed that after a few years of doing the practice, I would go to the dentist and I wouldn't be shaking, I wouldn't be crying, I wouldn't have to take 2 Valium to show up to an appointment. I could go in and say, look, I'm a bit of a nervous flyer. I might do a little bit of the shaky thing, but,
Mm-hmm.
to just pause from time to time. But I was totally in control of the process.
Wow.
Do I love the dentist now? No,
Oh.
but I can see that the trauma has moved through my body and I haven't had to recall it 25 times. I haven't had to be desensitized. I haven't done exposure therapy. I haven't done all of those potentially re-traumatizing things in order to move it through. It's just
Yeah.
naturally dissolved over time through moving all of the tension and the trauma through my body.
Wow. What that suggests that T.R.E can offer is mind-blowing. Like, as you were talking about that, I'm like, you didn't even have to deal with the actual issue. That by engaging in T.R.E and making that part of your regular practice and embodying that, it's also embodied you. So it's worked two-way and all that stuff has shifted anyway because as we know, as you've said already, the body stores our trauma and you've allowed it and embodied it and allowed it to release of its own accord. And you've got the evidence to back that up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other significant change I noticed too, Nat, was so because I grew up in a house that had a high level of conflict,
Mm-hmm.
I was highly conflict averse. So I
Yeah.
would shy away from conflict at any time of the day or week. Now, again, I still don't love conflict. I'm not going to sign up for it,
Not by choice, no.
not by choice. But what I do notice is that if I'm having a challenging conversation, instead of completely shutting down, which I used to most of the time, or
Oh,
every now and then,
understandably.
or every now and then I'd be a human volcano. I'd totally
Ah,
lose my
yeah.
lid. I'd feel really bad about it. I wouldn't say anything inappropriate, but just the volume of
Mm,
frustration that came through me was quite heightened. You know, those kinds of things have really resolved over time. And again, just moving through all of the somatic energy that's been stored in my body. Now I
mm.
can have a difficult conversation without becoming totally overwhelmed. So there's so many potentials. And the other thing I would say, so I told you I get on a rant and get really
Oh,
excited, you
love
wouldn't be
it.
able to
It's
shut me up.
fabulous.
But, you know, I think about trauma from two perspectives. There's the trauma that we have to endure, and then there's the trauma recovery.
Yes.
So I think about people who have got really sick kids or really sick parents, or, you know, are working with neurodivergent kids,
Hmm.
or you've got a difficult boss at work, or you have got a narcissistic partner. Like, there's so many traumatic things that we
Yeah.
have to endure that try as we might, we just can't. I mean, if you've got a sick parent or a parent that's in a nursing home, you
Mhm.
can't just say, oh, I'll see you later. You know, this is too much for me. I'm going to go to the beach. We are in it. We have no choice but to be in it.
We
So
certainly are.
exactly. So we need practices like T.R.E. so that we can actually continue to regenerate ourselves, continually move through the stress and the tension and the overwhelm, so that we can keep on showing up for our lives. And then,
Absolutely.
yeah, and then if we have that, the relationship ends, or we find a new job, or we manage to complete a contract, or whatever it
Hmm.
is, then we can go into a deeper trauma recovery model of
Yes.
T.R.E. So, you know, there's so many different applications,
Mm.
and it's so needed in our world today. We live in a complex world.
Oh, we certainly do. It's not going to get any less complex.
No,
The more that we are switched on 24/7 with social media and everything else, with all the complexities going on in the world, that we need this more than ever,
yeah,
because we need to come up with something, some practice that helps us heal at some level,
yeah.
our neurological systems to heal, and also ensures sustainability, exactly as you said.
Social sustainability. Like, I think
Absolutely.
about, it's not just about I want to come back to being my best self. When we consider Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory,
Yeah.
you know, that bottom section is social engagement. It's like,
Hmm.
when I'm more connected to me, I can be more healthily connected to you and more authentically connected to you. And then we
Absolutely.
together, it's not survival of the fittest, it's
No.
actually survival of the most connected. So
Mm.
T.R.E, there's some really beautiful communities popping up all over the world
Yeah.
where they just trim it together in parks and trim it together as a community. So it's not just a practice for our personal selves,
No.
it's actually a really beautiful practice for connection as well.
Oh, absolutely. And really, the potential for this to change communities, to help with connection, that sense of belonging, and really make a difference at a much greater level is huge. So I love this
Absolutely.
mission that you're on, to take this out, to roll it out even more in the world.
Yeah. So T.R.E is in over 40 countries all over the world. So it's not
Yeah.
just isolated in little pockets. And there are so many people out there bringing T.R.E to the greater world. I have more and more people turn up and say, oh, my psychologist recommended it, or my GP recommended it, which I didn't hear years ago. So it's really
No,
exciting to see more and more people become more and more knowledgeable around what's possible.
absolutely. And I know one of the things that I'll mention now, and I will put it in the show notes as well as anything else you share, was that Richmond, who you referred to, who I came into T.R.E through, Richmond developed up a free course, which is actually where I first came into it. And then I went to his training. I got that wrong. A free online course. And I'll put that in the show notes, that you can do to look at what T.R.E is, find out a little bit about it, and start to do it, or do a health check to see if you're able to do it, and then start the process, and then connect with someone like yourself, Em, who can walk you through it and take you to that deeper layer
Yeah.
of
And
work.
on the T.R.E Australia website, so Richmond created this free online course during COVID,
Yeah.
so that again we could bring T.R.E to the greater community. The free online course is good for people who don't have severe trauma. If you've
Yes.
got severe trauma, you're generally going to have issues with self-regulation. So, generally, if you've got an ACE score of under 3 or 4, then you're going to be okay to go. But if you have more complex trauma, on T.R.E Australia, there is a provider list, so you can find a provider in your local area. On traumaprevention.com, which is the global T.R.E website. For the people that aren't in Australia, there are local providers all over the world. So there's lots of people that you can go and see in order to be able to get the support. But if you do have just a very low level, not that any trauma is that low level, but anyway, if you have got a manageable level of trauma, then you can follow your body and experience the tremors and experience the innate wisdom that our body has within all of us to allow our bodies to just unfold and release and recover and renew itself. So it's pretty exciting.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it's mind-blowing, really, that this isn't more well-known. To me, it was like, what rock have I been hiding under? How did I not know about this?
Yeah.
It's been a game changer for me, and really the thing that I think really started to accelerate me into post-traumatic growth, moving out of post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm blown away with the potential that still lies ahead. And I think that our listeners really need to do their own exploration of it, find out about it, and give it a go.
Absolutely. And I'll be quiet in a minute, but
No.
that we've all had those experiences that we've gone to a talk therapist and we've talked about what we've been experiencing, and we've almost like brought everything to the surface, and we kind of walk away feeling yuck. It's almost like when people get slimed in Ghostbusters. Sometimes that's what the end of a therapy session feels like, has been for me.
Yeah.
But when you do a session of T.R.E, you actually walk away feeling fresh. You walk away feeling cleansed. You walk away feeling lighter. You walk away feeling freer. And I think you mentioned it before. It's like, this is a practice where you actually walk away feeling better than before. And it's an immediate thing. It's not an afterwards thing. It's like, no, I can actually feel it in my body now. I feel better.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. And, I was one of those people that braced and held myself so tight and was scared to let go because I was worried that I might explode and everything might come out and someone else might see it. So it's definitely a process. And by being able to stop and start at our own pace, it makes all the difference, and it's so much less scary. That part is the biggest part of what's included in learning T.R.E.
Yeah, absolutely. And that self-regulation piece, that stopping and starting, that keeping the effort level on a very low, moderated level. It's not like in order to win a running race, we have to run the fastest and get the best time, in actual fact. So I'm a bit of an energizer bunny. I fly around. I work without many breaks. I'm a go, go, go kind of person. And Terry's been such a great learning opportunity to recognise that in order to get the most out of the practice, we need to go slow in order to get the best progress.
Totally agree. And that's been one of my biggest learning curves, because I've always been a full-on, don't stop, just keep going, keep going, keep going. And it's led to massive burnout and exhaustion, autoimmune disorders, complex regional pain syndrome, all the bits and pieces that I know also comes from carrying my clients' stories all these years, as well as my own stuff. So that's been a game changer, because you can regulate it and go slowly and learn to read your own body so that you give yourself permission to rest. And that's probably been the greatest gift for me, as well as you, and being able to nurture me through that in the most beautiful, amazing way.
Yeah, thanks, Nat. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So I'm just mindful that we've been chatting for a while.
I
So
know.
if you could share one thing with our listeners that would help them as they navigate their post-trauma or adversity experiences and move into post-traumatic growth, what would that be?
Good question. First time in the last hour that I've been lost for words. So I would encourage them to, because often when we're stuck on that activation side of the curve, when we're stuck in our fear, when we're stuck in our contraction, when we're stuck in our overwhelm, all we see is pain, doom and gloom. But if we keep on moving, just take the next step, try the next thing, take the next breath sometimes. As we keep moving ourselves forward, we always get to the other side. So keep the faith, have faith in you, have faith in your body, have faith in the beautiful co-regulatory people around you, and know that you will get there. You know, trauma is a part of life, but trauma recovery is also very much a part of life.
Absolutely. What amazing wisdom. Thank you for sharing that. That is so true. So keep the faith. Absolutely. And that really not just the faith in what's outside ourselves, but faith that we have that innate wisdom and our body has it, whether we are aware of it or not.
Right.
Absolutely.
Correct. Spot on.
So yeah, Em, so as we move to wrapping the conversation up, where can our listeners find out more about you online? Where can they find you?
So you can find out more about me at www.thenurturefoundation.com. I am sort of regular on Instagram, but if you wanted to find out any of the latest T.R.E courses that I run, then there's information on that website. And also too, again, mentioning the T.R.E Australia website, that's got the free course. There's lots of great free resources that are available that Richmond has recorded. He's put in so much time to building the T.R.E community in Australia. So he's got some amazing resources and people can find their local providers there. And then there's the traumaprevention.com, which is the global T.R.E website. So you can find out information about the history of T.R.E. David Baselli's got some great videos on there. David Baselli's also got a really interesting YouTube channel as well. Okay. So there's loads of places that people can go to find out more about T.R.E.
Fantastic. I'll put all that in the show notes so everyone can find that and then they can reach out and enter your world, which is, a wonderful, wonderful experience. So thank you so much for sharing everything with us today and being so generous and gifting us what you have. Thanks, Em.
Oh, most welcome, Nat. Most welcome.
Thank you for joining me in this episode of Growing Tall Poppies. It is my deepest hope that today's episode may have inspired and empowered you to step fully into your post-traumatic growth so that you can have absolute clarity around who you are, what matters the most to you, and to assist you to release your negative emotions and regulate your nervous system so you can fully thrive. New episodes are published every Tuesday, and I hope you'll continue to join us as we explore both the strategies and the personal qualities required to fully live a life of post-traumatic growth and to thrive. So if it feels aligned to you and really resonates, then I invite you to hit subscribe. And it would mean the world to us if you could share this episode with others who you feel may benefit too. You may also find me on Instagram at Growing Tall Poppies and Facebook, Dr. Natalie Green. Remember, every moment is an opportunity to look for the lessons and to learn and increase your ability to live the life you desire and deserve. So for now, stay connected, stay inspired, stand tall like the tall poppy you are, and keep shining your light brightly in the world. Bye for now.